Welcome. We are so thankful that you have joined with us to watch this message. We pray it will be a blessing to you, that we'll all learn from it, grow, and become more like Jesus. Let's join in watching the message at this time.
A tale is told about a preacher that went to visit a poor farmer. The preacher asked the farmer, "If you had $200, would you give 100 of it to the Lord?" "Well, certainly," replied the farmer. The preacher asked another question. "If you had 2 cows, would you give one to the Lord?" "Absolutely," replied the farmer with certainty. The preacher pressed a little further. "If you had 2 pigs, would you give one to the Lord?" Now the farmer scratched his chin and he said, "Now, preacher, you know I have 2 pigs, don't you?" Well, how about a true story? You maybe heard of Ernest Shackleton, the explorer back in the early 1900s that sailed to the South to reach the South Pole. His first attempt failed and is disastrous, but a heroic story. The second attempt took place in 1908. Shackleton records in his diary that their food was nearly exhausted and he passed out the last of it to his sailors, his crew. This was a last ration of hardtack, which was a dried biscuit. Some of the men ate their biscuit immediately and others put it away in their duffel to save for later. They built the fire up to keep animals away and to protect themselves, keep a little bit of warmth that night. And as the men went to sleep, Shackleton saw one man sit up and look around to see if anyone was watching him. Shackleton's heart was broken because this was one of his most trusted sailors, as he saw this sailor reach over into the duffel of another man's, and Shackleton just knew what was going to happen, but he was wrong. That sailor took his own hardtack biscuit and placed it in the duffel of the other man, and he gave it away. Resources. We all have them, but what do we do with them? This morning we're preaching a sermon that many people do not like. Many Christians don't like it and non-Christians as well. But I pray that you will receive this message with open minds and open hearts and let God work within you to do the right thing with what we're talking about today. We're in the series, Act Like Jesus, and today's topic is a tale of resources. Resources. We've all got them. Our possessions, our resources are pigs, hardtack, dried biscuits. Maybe it's a house, car, truck, boats, lawn mowers, furniture, dishes, certain silverware, or things that we have. How about natural resources? Coal, oil, natural gas, water, wind. Wealth is a resource. Our bank account, our portfolio, our investments, or properties that we own. Those are all resources. Our lives are resources, such as our time, our physical abilities, or our mental abilities, mental capabilities. So you can see that we have all kinds of resources. When we talk about resources, we're all pretty wealthy with them, and we all have them to varying degrees. So when we talk resources, we're talking a wide variety of things or items. Let's start by determining what is ours, what are our resources, and what aren't ours. We go to Psalm 24, which is a psalm of David. Psalm 24, verse 1, David writes, "The earth is the Lord's, and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. For He founded it on the seas and established it on the waters." What belongs to God? Everything. And what belongs to us? Absolutely nothing. We confirm this as we go to Psalm chapter 50, beginning with verse 9. Listen to what is written here. God says, "I have no need of a bull from your stall or of goats from your pens. For every animal of the forest is mine, and the cattle on 1,000 hills. I know every bird in the mountains, and the insects in the fields are mine. If I were hungry, I would not tell you, for the world is mine, and all that is in it. Now, this passage pretty well says it all. You and I own nothing. Thus, our point is, everything belongs to God. Every single thing that we see or sense or smell or breathe, it all belongs to God. You say, well, wait a minute, I own my own house. God must certainly laugh about that. I just bought a new car. You don't own it. God must laugh. Everything belongs to God. Even your kids, you say, well, I'm raising my kids. No, you don't. Your kids are on loan from God. God owns those kids, or God possesses those kids. Those are God's children. He has no need of your house, but He owns it. He has no need of your cat or dog or pig or biscuit, but He owns it. He has no need of your money. He created everything on this earth, including the oxygen, the air that we breathe. You might say, well, wait a minute. I built my house. I own my house. It is mine. Well, not really. Who planted the seed that grew into the tree that developed into the lumber that you have your house constructed out of? Or the furniture? Who created the material that made up the concrete for your foundation? Who made up the material for your rugs and vinyl floors and the walls and everything in it? God did. God owns everything, and everything is His. And one thing that we need to remember is that we are the caretakers of what's His. We go back to the Garden of Eden. God planted the garden, and He put Adam and Eve in the garden to do what? To take care of the garden. And that same principle applies to us in this planet and to our neighbors and to our brothers and sisters and everybody. We are here to take care of things. So when we talk about what all does God own, God also owns our money, our income. It's all God's. It belongs to God. He lets us borrow it. He lets us use it, but it's all God's. We go to the Old Testament and we look at this Old Testament thing called the tithe. That's the amount of money that God said people must return to Him. Remembering, as we said, the money belongs to God. Now, there's several passages in the Old Testament that talks about the tithe, but we're just going to name some of them, then we'll finally read one. We go back to the time of Abraham. This is long before Israel, the nation of Israel, ever even existed. Genesis chapter 14, 19 through 20, and Genesis chapter 28, 20 through 22 talks about the tithe, giving 10% back to God. We look at the Old Testament law in the Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, talks about the tithe. Leviticus 27, 30 through 34. Numbers 18, 21 and 26. Deuteronomy 12, 5 and 6. Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 21 and 28 through 29. Nehemiah chapter 10, verses 35 through 37. Let's read the Nehemiah passage. We'll start with verse 36. And listen to what God says belongs to Him. As it is also written in the law, we bring the firstborn of our sons and of our cattle, of our herds and of our flocks to the house of our God, to the priests ministering there. Moreover, we will bring to the storerooms of the house of our God, to the priests, the firstborn of the first of our ground meal, of our grain offerings, of the fruit of our trees, and of all our new wine and olive oil. And we will bring a tithe of our crops to the Levites, for it is the Levites who collect the tithes in all their towns where we work. Thus, our point is, God expects us to return at least 10% of our income to Him. Now, let's examine this. God expects us to return, since it's His already, at least, the very minimum, 10% of our income, and we return it to Him. This means 10% of our gross pay. So in other words, if you have an hourly wage or a salary and you receive your paycheck or your direct deposit, whatever it is, that top figure, that gross figure, before President Biden gets any of his taxes, the top figure is what we give 10% to God, right off the top. Now, if you own your own business, you have business expenses, or if you're a farmer, you have farm expenses. And so you take your expenses out first, and then what's left over before taxes, you give that 10% to God. Those of you that are reading through the Bible with us this year, I think you're probably, I'm a little bit ahead, so you're probably through most of the law, the Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, or you're close to it anyway. Think of all the times that you read where God demanded the tithe, but also He called for the Israelites to bring and donate to the tabernacle, or to give to the sacrifices and so forth. Let's just talk about some of these. They gave their animals for offerings, for sacrifices. That's over and above and beyond the tithe. They were called on to donate money to the temple for construction and then repairs eventually, over and above and beyond the tithe. They were called to give their offerings to the priests when the priests would do their priestly duties for them in these sacrifices or various things. That's over and above and beyond what they were to give as the tithe. The amount of money that the Israelites gave to God by means of the priests and the Levites and so forth, that amount of money was way, way, way beyond the 10% tithe. And this is what God demanded out of them. And we say, well, Jesus in the New Testament, that's all in it. Well, no, it isn't. Jesus said that He came to fulfill the law of the Old Testament, not to do away with it. So He never did away with the tithe or the abundant giving that we are to do for Him. We look at the New Testament, the book of Acts, and some of the Apostle Paul's writings. He collected money from the various churches to redistribute to the churches and people that were in need. And he wanted these people to do these collections ahead of time, so he would pick them up and take them back to Jerusalem or wherever he needed to go. The problem today with many Christians, however, is that we in America, we are wealthy. Compared to the rest of the world, we are filthy with wealth. And the problem is that we've got our greedy hands around the money and our possessions, and we don't want to give them up. So therefore we get kind of greedy. Reminds me of the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages were a bloody time when there were wars and fighting, as many times in history. When the soldiers would come to Christ and get baptized, many of those soldiers, because they knew that they were men that had to kill to fight in battle, kill or be killed in this case, as they battled for their country, many of those soldiers, when they were baptized, whichever arm they used to hold their sword, they held it up out of the water if they were right-handed, or the left arm and hand if they were left-handed, because they felt that that was a killing mechanism, a killing part of them, and they figured that Jesus would never accept that, so they kept it out of the water so it could do its duty. Now, this was wrong thinking, but it's a fact of what some of them did. Sadly, today, many Christians have similar thinking. Now, we may not hold our right hand or left hand out of the water when we're baptized, but it appears like we do, because many times Christians have a hard time reaching to their wallet to give to God. And it's as though they say, I can't do that with that hand. It just doesn't work. I'm not going to give that hand to Jesus. I'm not going to give that arm to Jesus. We are to give out of the goodness of our hearts. Now let's pause here and address a situation that we've got at church. We go back to 2019. That was a year that we really did not make budget all year long. And late in the year, we put out a plea to you, the congregation, and said, we need some help here. Can you step up and help us to get into the black? And our offerings drastically increased, but we didn't get back in the black that year. But 2020 we stayed in the black all year long. We met budget every week. We actually gained and we got ahead. And then 2021 hit. Now there's various things that happened this year, and we are running in the red on our weekly budget. First of all, early in the year, we got COVID in the congregation. It was hitting our whole area, so we shut down for 2 weeks. And so there was nobody there. Our income started dropping. And then when we came back, we had bad winter weather. That we had few attendance. Many of you stayed home, which was good for some people, and those others of us plugged through the snow. But our weekly offering has never come up to match what it's supposed to. We've had some good weeks, but we can't seem to catch up. So here's what we're calling on. Those of you that are behind, would you catch up? Would you give that offering, whether you bring it in, drop it in the offering plate, or send it in, or go online, and let's catch up with that offering, because it's going to be tougher the longer that you wait. So catch up with that. And those of us that are caught up, and there's probably many of us, can we in the next week or two before Easter, let's give some extra and let's get our budget back in the black. Now that kind of rhymes. Let's get back in the black before Easter. Let's get the budget back in the black. Let's get that caught up. Now God expects us to give over and above and beyond that 10%. The question is, are you? Are we, as a church, doing more than we think we can? Now we understand we've got a missionary budget going to, and I don't know where we're at with that. So don't take away from that to give to the church. You've pledged to the missionary budget. So take care of that. But can we get our church budget back into the black before Easter? Now, as we said, God expects more than just the tithe. And there's other ways of doing this. And we're going to talk about a rather unique one now. Many of you are familiar with the old King James Bible. Very ancient wording and so forth. And there's a word in the Old Testament, in the King James Bible, that many of us have forgotten about. Jesus talks about this in several places in the Bible, but in Matthew chapter 6, verses 3 and 4, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus talks about alms. Now, alms is defined as money, goods, or food given as charity to the poor or the needy. Now, you don't find the word alms in the modern King James Bibles. I looked, it's not there. They've replaced it. They've reworded it into modern English. And our NIV and other translations that I found did not have the word in it. So let's read Jesus' words in the New International Version that we use, Matthew chapter 6, verses 3 and 4. And then I'm going to attempt to read it out of the old King James and let you see what that says. First out of the New International Version, Matthew chapter 6, verse 3. Jesus says, "But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you." Now that's easy to understand. Let's see what the old King James Bible says. "But when thou doest alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth, that thine alms may be in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret himself shall reward thee openly." Now the point here is that we need to give to the needy. Now notice Jesus expected his listeners to be giving to the needy. He didn't tell them to give. His instructions here were that when you do this, when you give the alms, when you give to the needy, don't tell anybody about it. And this is what many of the people would do. They were bragging about it. They would give to the needy, give alms, give money or goods to the poor, and then they'd tell everybody about it, especially the Pharisees. They'd brag about it. Jesus is saying, no. Do your giving, but just between you and God. You don't need to tell anybody else about it. So our point is, Jesus, or God, let's go back to God. God expects us to also give to the poor and those in need. God expects us to also give to the poor and those in need. Now, our government has created a boondoggle for us in these modern times. Decades ago, the church used to be the watchdog, the one that oversaw taking care of the poor. There were a lot of churches, there were a lot of Christians, and especially in this country, and so the churches would distribute to the poor and help the poor out and the needy as they saw fit. So if you tried to scam the church, wait a minute, these are your neighbors, you know them. You knew who was scamming you and who really needed help. But then the government stepped in, and the government started programs, the welfare program and various aspects to help the poor out. And the church backed off because now we've got the government overseeing it. The problem is that Jesus says taking care of the poor is our responsibility. Not the government's, it's our responsibility. And even though the government is doing it, many of these poor people are falling through the cracks. And the other aspect of the thing is that many of these poor people are dysfunctional and don't know about how to go about getting the funds that they need. Now, we have a lot of people in the Lima, Allen County, Wapakoneta, Auglaize County areas that are poor or needy. And we've got a lot of professional scam artists. All you have to do is work in the church a while and you see how these scam artists try to work the churches. For example, we've got one guy in the Lima area that we call the Cancer Man. Now, that's not what title we gave to him, but a charitable organization that deals with these things a lot tells me that this guy always claims to have cancer. And he's done this for years and years and years. And so that's the basis of his plea, but his plea is always different. And he calls the churches. He's called us several times. And we're on to him. So we're not helping him out because these charitable organizations are overseeing it and seeing that the people that need it are getting their help. But he calls us and we know how to handle that. Another man in the Lima area I know of that was needy, he's a dysfunctional man, and somebody in the community took him in. They had a spare little house. They put him up in this house. They said, now all you have to do is do a little bit of workforce around here, some yard work, help clean up, and we'll help supply some food and so forth. And they were seeing to it that he was getting assistance. And this was going on for a while. And then they caught him out with a sign begging for food, begging for help along the highways. And they said, no, you can't do this. We're going to kick you out if you keep doing this. We're taking care of you. We're supplying it. You don't need to do that. Sure enough, they kept finding him out there. He just kept migrating back to this dysfunction of begging. It just seemed to be in him. These are dysfunctional people. And we're not putting them down. We're just stating facts that these are many of the people that are out there. Now, many of them are scam artists, but even some of the scam artists are dysfunctional. Give these people a job and everything that they could ever ask for, and they're going to go back to begging. It's almost as though it's in their DNA. They're going to be back on the street. And most of them receive government aid. They've got a little bit of help, a little bit of income. There's organizations locally that help them. But there's just something in their minds that says that they've got to beg, and they keep going at it. So what do we do with these people? Well, first of all, we want to assure you that God doesn't want us to waste our money. On the other hand, we're supposed to help them. Now, do we ever, as the church, do we get scammed at times? Yes, we do. I'll admit that. We got scammed recently. I guess I'd rather make a mistake in helping somebody. It was a new one. We'd never heard this one before. But we made a mistake in helping somebody, and I'd rather do that than God send us somebody and we don't help them at all. So yes, we get caught once in a while, but we have to help these people to some extent with the help of local organizations. And the problem here is that during this COVID pandemic, some of the organizational connections have broken down in need of money and so forth, and so we don't have quite the assistance that we usually have. So the question is, how can we help? Well, we've already talked about helping us get back into the budget. We got another project for us. How about, since there are many people in the Allen County and Allglaze County areas, and we draw our congregation from these two areas, how about if we help these people with clothing? Now, I've got some really nice clothes at home that I really need to give away to somebody that can use them. And what we're calling for here the next 2 Sundays, so this would be March 14th and 21st, bring your good quality clothing in, and we will do our best to redistribute it. We've got 2 places. We've got one place that will take some men's and women's clothing and maybe some kids' clothing. They can't take much, but we've got this first place that will take some. We've got another place that will take men's clothing, and then we've got what we know of a couple thrift stores. We try to avoid the thrift stores since we know that they are reselling some of these things, but we're also told that these thrift stores open their stores up to the poor and the needy at times, and these people get to come through and pick what they like, what fits, and the store gives these articles to them free. So we're calling for you, the congregation, to help us out. I've got things I'm going to bring in. We want it clean, we want it laundered, and we're not looking for things that are half worn out. Now, this can be good work clothes, it can be good casual clothes, it can be good casual dress clothes, or it can be dress clothes. But we want good clothing. We don't want stuff that is junk. You can go buy some new things if you want to. We're asking launder it and press it and get it ready to go so that these stores don't have to, or the place that we give them don't have to spend a lot of time. But we're looking for quality clothing. Now let's go a little bit deeper here. Let's go one more step. I am asking, and this is going to be tough for me, I am asking that we choose one article of clothing, whatever that might be. It could be a shirt, a dress, slack, could be a fancy dress, it could be a suit, or whatever it is, something that you currently wear, and give that away. It's going to hurt. It's going to be difficult. And so we're asking, can we give not only some good clothing, can we give a piece of our cherished clothing? That doesn't have to be that one item that you cherish most, but it can be. But what can we give that will hurt a little bit for the aid of somebody else? Now, when we're talking about giving, I understand that not everyone is able to give, and we're not going to look down on anybody that can't. But I've got some questions for you. If you say that you can't give, do you buy coffee at Starbucks? That's not cheap. Or maybe you go to Speedway for your coffee or soft drinks or tea or whatever it is, or your snacks. How much do we spend for these little drinks and snacks for us, whether it be at drive-thrus or the fast carryouts or whatever it is? How much are we spending? And can we cut back on some of that and give it to God, and give it to the needy, and give it to those that are hurting? Where can we sacrifice in our budget? Maybe you're spending too much and putting too much on your credit card. Where can we cut back? Now, I've got one more idea, and you're going to want to throw tomatoes at me on this one. As the weather warms up, we're going to start seeing people out along the streets, the intersections, with signs held up, made out of cardboard, out of work, hungry, no food, feeding a family, need help, need a work. And we all look at those people and we have our thoughts. Let's just face it, they're not good thoughts. We think they just go get a job. There's jobs out there, you can go do this. But remember also, we said many of these people are dysfunctional. Well, let's do something. The next time that we see someone like this, let's suck it up and pull a $5 or $10 bill out of our billfold and hand it to them. Now, whatever you're doing to give it to them, don't cause a traffic jam, don't cause an accident, don't do anything stupid. But if you're at the stoplight and you're waving a $5 bill or $10 bill out the window, I guarantee you, even if they say they can't walk, they will get over to your car. I guarantee it. They will get there. I know, you're saying, well, they're just going to take it, they're going to spend it on alcohol. I understand that. But when we go back to the Bible times, and Jesus talks about helping the poor and this and that, they had alcohol back then. Those same people could have taken that money that they were given, the alms that they were given, they could have gone to the local beer joint, whatever you want to call it. They had strong wine in those days also, and those same people could have gotten drunk on it. There could have been winos back then, the same as there are today. But the fact of the matter is the Bible does not say anything about Jesus saying, now be careful, don't give them too much cash because they're just going to get drunk on it. We don't read that. The Bible says to help these people. And if you're afraid of giving them cash, okay, here's something else to do. Keep a box of Cheerios in the back seat. An unopened box, in my case, I usually am snacking on Cheerios. Keep an unopened box of something healthy in your back seat. So the next time that you see these people, you can wave it out the window or give it a toss to them, and they can get that for food, and it'll be something for their bellies. And the reason I say cereal is because many times dry cereal is unless it's sugar-coated, is healthy, and people eat it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So I'm encouraging each of us to keep a little tiny bit of cash. Believe me, nobody's going to break into your car looking for $5 or $10. Carry a little bit of cash with you to help these people out, or take them to McDonald's, take them to a restaurant and feed them a meal and tell them about Jesus. When you help them out, tell them that it's in the name of Jesus that you're doing this. At least give them that much, and you'll be discipling somebody. You'll be telling them about Jesus. Whether it's food or money or you buy them a meal, whatever it is, be Jesus to them. And let's stop being the Scrooges and the stingy, wealthy Americans that we seem to be. In September 1939, German troops invaded Poland. For 3 years, 15-year-old Gerda Weizmann and her family hid in the basement of a Jewish ghetto. They hid there until 1942. When the Nazis found them, they tore Gerda from her mother's arms and sent her mother to a Nazi death camp where she died. Gerda was sent to a Nazi concentration camp where she lived for 3 years under slave labor. She was the slave. She later survived a 350-mile death march. 2,000 women made this trip, and only 120 survived it. Gerda was one of them, and her childhood friend. They went to another slave labor Nazi camp, and Gerda's childhood friend, Ilse, found a raspberry, a single raspberry. When Ilse found this, she took the raspberry and she plucked the leaf and she wrapped the raspberry in the leaf. This raspberry was her sole possession that she had. Her only resource, as we might say with this message. It was hers, all hers. She carried it with her all day long. And at the end of the day, she took this lone raspberry, and Ilse gave it to Gerda. Not too long after that, Ilse died. And it wasn't very long after that that the Allies came and freed Gerda and the other women from that Nazi slave labor camp. Gerda never forgot that unselfish giving of her best friend, Ilse. Never forgot that the rest of her life. Ilse gave all that she had to her friend Gerda. I don't think you and I can comprehend the good that our tithes, our offerings, our alms, our giving to the needy. I don't think you and I can comprehend the blessing that we are to others when we do that. And I know that some preachers will say, well, when you give, God will give you abundantly. Well, and sometimes He does, but I'm not going to guarantee you that. What I will guarantee you, though, is He will bless you. It might be a good feeling. That might be the extent of it, but you don't know what a great feeling that is until you've done it, and until you've lived it. And it helps you to make you want to give again to somebody else, that when you give when it hurts, it's one thing just to give out of your abundance, but when you give and it hurts you to give, that is when God is going to really smile down on you. Whether you give to the church, it's our church, or if you're maybe listening from another church, give to your church. Give that 10% to God. That's what it's His, and that's what He asks back for. That has never changed. He's not calling for 2%. He's not calling for 5% or 7%. He says 10%. But He also calls for us to give to others. We can give of our possessions, of our clothing, of our goods. We can give our help. We can give of our minds in different ways. God's calling on you and me to give to Him and to our brothers and sisters. Almighty Father in heaven, this is powerful. And I don't think we comprehend it because we're so self-absorbed. We're so into what we want, into making ourselves to the same status or better than our neighbors or our friends. We want that bigger TV and that bigger car, the more modern car and the newer car. And Father, I know you've blessed us with these things, but at the same time, help us to give to others that are in need, to lend our hand, to lend our money, to lend our time, to lend our clothes. And Father, may you bless us, if with nothing else than the great internal feeling that we did what you asked us to do. And we gave out of the heart, and we gave till it hurt. And that's okay. We don't need to tell anyone else about it. It's just between you and us, or husband and wife and you. And we teach our kids and our grandkids how to give willingly also. You gave your Son. You're not asking that kind of sacrifice of us. We can certainly give 10% and more. We can certainly give of items to help those in need. Thank you for your blessing to us, the bounty that we have. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you for watching the message. If we can help you in any way, we ask that you please contact us. Check us out on our website, rouscupchurch.org, and that's spelled ROUSCULP church.org. You can find information there on how to contact us. We'd love to hear from you or talk with you and help you in your walk with Jesus. Thank you once again for joining with us.